Good evening, friends, and welcome to Dark Historian. Tonight, I've brought you a quiet, calming tale, a gentle bedtime, sleep story for wakeful minds and wandering hearts. This video is part of the Boring History for Sleep Stories series, made to help you unwind and fall asleep fast. In this episode, I'll share soothing sleep stories that invite your thoughts to slow down and your body to let go. If your mind is still busy, or if peace feels far away, you've found the right place. So gently close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let these sleep-inducing chronicles of history carry you into rest. You're silent. Night begins now, with Dark Historian. Story 1. Olives and Oracles. Daily life at the Temple of Delphi beneath the pomegranate tree. Good morning, little one. The stars have just faded from the sky. You stir beneath a woolen blanket, still warm from sleep. The stone beneath your mat is cool and uneven, part of the old sleeping floor in the servants' quarters of the Temple of Apollo at Delphi. Light filters through the narrow opening above the doorway, and outside, the air is silver with mist. The pomegranate tree at the edge of the courtyard is shaking off dew like a cat stretching awake. You are 12 years old, an orphan taken in by the temple. Your job today, as with most days, is simple. Sweep the colonnade, fetch water from the Castalian spring, and carry firewood to the kitchen, where the priestesses will boil barley for the midday offering. But behind the smallness of the chores, the rhythms of something larger, something divine pulls through every crack in the marble. This is the Temple of Apollo, god of light and knowledge, and you live in its quiet corners. Morning chores. Among marble and moss, the marble is always cold in the morning. You slide your feet into worn leather sandals and gather your broom. The bristles are made of stiff reed cut from the riverbank, just below and bound with linen twine by an older boy named Manan. He taught you how to bind the twine tight and to always press the reed tips in hot water to straighten them. Manan is 14 now, nearly old enough to leave temple service and join a merchant's household. He hopes to become a scribe. Outside, the colonnade is hushed. Even the sparrows seem to speak in whispers here. You begin to sweep, gently pushing aside olive leaves, dust, and petals fallen from the laurel crowns that the priests wear. Occasionally, your broom touches something curious, a sliver of bronze from a votive offering, a bit of crushed charcoal, or a long silken hair that must have fallen from one of the pithiest, the women who speak the words of Apollo himself. A column hums slightly under your hand. Some say the stone remembers the words it hears, holding prayers in its pores like breath in the chest. 2. The spring that whispers by mid-morning. The sun has warmed the flagstones just enough that your sandals no longer feel damp. You pick up the clay jug and make your way down the sacred path to the Castalian spring. Each footstep echoes softly as you pass through groves of bay, laurel, and olive, the leaves flickering like hands in silent blessing. The spring has been here longer than the temple, long before Apollo claimed the mount, before the serpentine guardian python was slain and buried beneath the rock. Before there were oracles and offerings, the water bubbled up from the earth like a secret. You kneel. The jug dips into the cold stream, and the sound of it fills your ears, bubbling, trickling, the faintest music. You drink first, it's allowed, as long as you show respect. The water tastes of minerals and moss, cool enough to clear your thoughts. The priestesses say that even the gods drink here, in forms unseen. Above the spring, carved into the rock, is a worn inscription: know thyself. You wonder if water helps you do that. 3. The temple kitchen and the soft clink of copper you return slowly, careful not to spill. In the kitchen courtyard, smoke curls from the low hearth, and a chorus of pigeons coos from the eaves. The priestess Melita is grinding barley with a stone mortar, her arms strong and steady. Another girl, Aglaia, slices onions for the offering. Stew, her eyes watering, but her hands never hesitating. You pour the water carefully into the basin, and Melita gives you a nod of thanks. She does not speak much, only when needed, but she always makes sure. You get the warmest piece of bread at noon. On festival days, the kitchen bursts with activity. Honey cakes shaped like bees, olives soaked in wine, dried figs, and goat cheese, wrapped in fig leaves. But today is ordinary, a midweek offering to Apollo, just stew and bread. The simplicity feels like reverence. A copper pot boils over, and someone laughs softly as they move it from the flame. Even here, in the echo of a sacred mountain, life has its small human rhythms. For noon smoke and laurel leaves, the sun is high now. A thin line of pilgrims moves up the sacred slope, some barefoot, some holding tokens, miniature votive sculptures of animals, hands, ears, or hearts. They have come seeking answers from the Pythia, the high priestess who speaks the gods, riddling wisdom, but they must wait. Before the oracle can speak, she must purify herself in the spring and inhale the sacred smoke of burning laurel leaves. No one, not even Uez, allowed near when this happens. The sanctum is off limits, guarded. But sometimes you sneak glances. There is a space in the east wall where the wind pushes incense through a crack. And on certain days, if you sit near the fig tree, you can smell it sharp, green, and dizzying. It's said that the god does not speak in clear words. Instead, he gives impressions, sensations, riddles woven like vines. The priestess does not decide the answers. She simply channels them. Sometimes, you wonder what the god would say if you asked nothing at Olive. You only listened. The boy with the broken offering in the late afternoon. While you're gathering fallen olive branches for kindling, a boy arrives at the temple steps. He's about your age, but dressed in a traveler's cloak. His hands are scratched, and he carries a broken wooden carving, what looks like the figure of a horse, one leg missing. You watch him from behind a column as he hesitates near the altar. He looks unsure whether to offer it or not, whether something broken is still worthy. One of the older priests sees him, approaches gently, and kneels beside him. You can't hear the words, but you see the boy nod. He leaves the figure on the altar anyway. Later, after dusk, you find it resting among the others, not thrown away, but nestled carefully between coins and feathers, as if the god understands that most things in life are offered incomplete. You carry that thought with you through evening chores, vie under the stars. With laurel in your hair, the sun sinks behind Mount Parnassus, casting the whole sanctuary in shades of purple and gold. The air is cooler now, and the marble shines faintly like bone in moonlight. Pilgrims sleep under porticos or near the temple gate, wrapped in cloaks. You sit beneath the pomegranate tree again. Your chores are finished. The hearths have quieted. You've woven a tiny ring of laurel leaves and placed it in your hair. No one saw. From here you can see the roof of the Aditant, the inner sanctum where the Pythia speaks. Somewhere inside, the oracle is sleeping, or perhaps lying still in trance. You wonder what she dreams of. Do the gods visit her dreams, or do they leave her in silence, as they do with everyone else? An owl calls from the olive grove. The stars above flicker like temple oil lamps. Slowly, your eyes begin to close, and just before sleep takes you. You think of the broken horse, of laurel smoke, of the spring that whispers. You think of the phrase carved above the water's edge, "Know thyself," but perhaps the gods already do. The oracle prepares to speak asterisk. Dawn returns quietly. You wake before the others today, stirred not by footsteps or voices, but by something more delicate, a shift in the wind, a silence that feels expectant. The temple has a different weight this morning. It's oracle day. Only once every 9 days does the god Apollo descend at least. That is how the elders speak of it. They say he arrives with the rising sun, carried not on clouds or thunder, but in breath and vapor, in the slow boiling of laurel and the footsteps of pilgrims. You sit up slowly and wrap your himation tight around your shoulders. Outside, even the pigeons seem hushed. Somewhere, a priest stirs the first fire. Today, the Pythia will speak. The quiet ritual of purification. You aren't allowed to see the oracle's preparations directly, but everyone knows the pattern, passed down in whispered fragments and long glances from behind the colonnade. First comes the purification bath in the Castalian spring. The Pythia barefoot, wrapped in unbleached wool, walks slowly down the sacred path before sunrise, accompanied only by a senior priestess and the laurel bearer. There is no procession, no singing. The silence is part of the rite. The spring is colder before dawn. Legend says it runs directly from the veins of the earth, and that to bathe in it is to remember the world before names. As you sweep near the temple courtyard, you glimpse the Pythia's back as she returns, hair wet, face lowered, feet pale against the stone. You do not stare. To see her fully on Oracle Day is considered inappropriate, too intimate, like peeking at a dream in the middle of forming. Behind her, the priestess Meleta carries a shallow bowl of bay leaves, still damp with dew. 2. Preparing the Adetanth sanctum. The Adetaness, the chamber no child may enter. Its threshold lies behind 3 layers of curtain and column, guarded not with force, but with time and tradition. But you have heard its shape described, round like the belly of an amphora, with a hollow stone amphilis at its center, the sacred navel of the world. Around it are the coiled bronze tripods, the laurel braziers, the jars of sacred spring water, and the place where the Pythia sits, a 3-legged stool above a narrow fissure in the earth. The old stories say that fumes rise from their sweet-smelling vapors, warm and dizzying. The breath of the slain python itself. The Pythia breathes these fumes as the laurel burns, and then she waits. Her eyes close, and the god comes. Or so the faithful believe. 3 pilgrims in line, with questions in hand by mid-morning. The first of the day's petitioners have gathered in a slow-moving queue at the temple gate. Some wear fine robes and smell of imported oil, ambassadors, perhaps, or minor kings. Others are barefoot shepherds, nervous and clutching tokens, carved animals, bits of ivory, rings braided from horsehair. Each holds a question, but none may speak it directly. Each must offer a sacrifice, first, sometimes coins, sometimes honey cakes, occasionally a white feathered bird. Then the question is passed from priest to priest until it reaches the sanctum, and then they wait. Not all will hear the gods. Answer today. Sometimes the Pythia cannot speak. Sometimes she speaks in riddles. Sometimes she offers answers only the gods themselves could understand. Once, a man asked if he would return alive from war. The answer came, "You will go, you will return, you will not die." But he did die later, in bed, at home. The god had not lied, only spoken like wind through reeds. 4. The girl who watches and waits today. You are assigned to water duty near the western wall. It's a small job, refilling the basins with fresh spring water so the priests can wash their hands before sacred duties. But it gives you a vantage point. From here, you can see the rhythm of the temple unfold. You see Aglaia, your friend, quietly weaving a new laurel crown near the altar. You see a young priest smoothing the wax tablet where he'll write down the Pythias utterances. You see a small boy clinging to his mother's cloak, staring wide-eyed at the columns. You begin to think about your own question. If you could ask the oracle one thing, what would it be? When will I leave the temple? Will I become someone important? Will I ever see the sea? But the question that forms, slow and tender, is simpler. Does the god ever answer without words? You pour another jug of water. The marble beneath your feet feels warm now. The sun has climbed above the olive trees. When the oracle speaks, the Pythia's first trance begins just after noon. You do not see it, but you feel its arrival. The temple stills. The air thickens, as if someone has inhaled and forgotten to exhale. Birds go quiet. Somewhere, the laurel leaves begin to burn. The answer to the first question arrives quickly. A single phrase, spoken in a voice not the Pythias, own deeper, slower, like wind dragging a chariot wheel. The priest writes it down, and it is carried to the supplicant. Then the next question. Then another. Sometimes she speaks. Sometimes she is silent. Sometimes her voice lifts into tones not heard before, chanting, almost singing. The god is not predictable. From your post by the western wall, you can't hear the words, only the rhythm, a pause, a breath, a sudden cry, then stillness again. This continues for hours. By late afternoon, the priest declares that the god has departed. The Pythia is carried from the chamber, pale and dazed, wrapped in linen like a child. She will sleep the rest of the day. No one may speak to her, not even Melita Vai. What the god leaves behind as the temple relaxes back into its daily hum. You are sent to sweep the outer steps. Olive dust, sandal prints, and a dropped earring are all that remain from the line of pilgrims. But near the base of the steps, you find something unusual. A small stone carving, no taller than your hand. A goat, perfectly shaped, left behind. You bring it to the priests, but they wave you off. Keep it, one says. If the god did not take it, perhaps it's meant for you. You sit beneath the pomegranate tree and turn it over in your hands. The detail is delicate, the beard, the hooves, even the faint impression of a collar. You wonder who carved it. You wonder what question they carried in their heart when they left it behind. You set it near your bed that night, beside a sprig of laurel and a scrap of bread wrapped in linen. As the stars return, the mountain is quiet again. The sky deepens to violet. Pilgrims descend the path with heavier steps, some joyful, some troubled. The gods do not promise comfort, only mystery. You lie on your mat. The goat carving rests near your shoulder. Aglaia breathes softly nearby. You think again about the questions you might ask, but none of them matter tonight. Instead, you whisper softly, "Good night, Apollo," not a prayer, not a plea, just a thank you for the laurel smoke, for the whispers, for the silence that answers without words. The last day of a Pythia asterisk, the scent of laurel smoke is different today. It clings a little heavier to the air, thicker perhaps than it should be. There's a hush in the temple knot. The the usual reverent silence of sacred rites, but a quieter stillness, like an unspoken question resting on everyone's lips. You notice it in the way the kitchen fires burn lower, in the absence of sparrows from the rooftop eaves, in the unusual way the elders walk together without speaking. You are older now, 14. You've been at Delphi since you were small. You know this stone, these olive groves, the echoes of sandalwood on marble steps, but today feels slow in a different way. A letter in laurel inque, begin. Your morning chores in the usual order, sweeping the corridor behind the eastern colonnade, preparing the water jugs with fresh spring runoff, and folding the small white linen, cloths used by the priests. But as you pass near the doorway to the scriptorium, a small, sunlit alcove where scribes prepare temple records, you're stopped gently by one of the elder priests. His hands are soft with age, his hair is silver. I have something, he says, voice like old parchment. It's not for you, but perhaps you should carry it. He hands you a small scroll, tied with a single thread of woven laurel fiber. Number, wax seal, no markings. Take it to the Pythias chamber, he says simply. She will be waiting. You've never been allowed near the oracle's quarters before. You hesitate, but the priest only smiles and turns away. To the Pythias chamber. The Pythia lives not in gold or grandeur, but in a chamber carved into the outer flank of the sanctuary, half stone, half sun. When you arrive, the door is slightly open. You knock gently. Enter, says a voice, low, slow, worn like wind-smoothed wood. She sits at a table, her back to you, combing laurel oil through her long hair. You can see streaks of grey now where once it was dark and full. Her robe is simple and dyed wool, frayed at the edges. No crown, no bronze. She turns slowly. Her face is neither young nor old, only quiet. You hand her the scroll. She unties the laurel thread, reads the message, then places the scroll beside a bowl of olives. The God will not speak through me again, she says softly. Not after. Today you say nothing. There is nothing to say. You feel, all at once, the fullness of time pressing around youth, a long chain of oracles before her. The countless voices whispered into smoke and stone. Would you walk with me? She asks. 3. The path of the Sibyl walk slowly together, up the winding sacred path past the olive trees, the ruined theatre steps, and the bronze tripod that marks where the old prophecies were once delivered aloud to the crowd. The Pythia leans slightly on a staff. The mountain wind toys with her robe. She tells you little things. How the spring water tastes different in early winter. How the laurel only blooms on certain sides of the slope. How the god's presence comes not as fire or thunder, but as warmth on the chest, like standing in sunlight, even in shade. You pass the spot where, years ago, you saw a traveller leave behind a carved wooden horse. The Pythia pauses here. Most people think the god only answers questions, she says, but sometimes he only listens. You ask her quietly what she means. She smiles faintly. There are answers that come in silence, child. The loudest things Apollo ever told me were never spoken. 4. The final trance word spreads quietly through the temple that this will be the final prophecy of this Pythias life. Number, fanfare, no feast, only the rhythm of tradition, slower, more solemn. She bathes once more in the Castalian spring. You watch from the grove, hidden, respectful. Her steps are careful now, but her spine remains straight. She returns to the temple, not as a woman weakened by age, but as one deeply woven into stone. In the adjutant, the sacred chamber, only a few are permitted to enter. You are not among them, but this time you sit by the crack in the east wall, just as you did as a child. You smell the laurel smoke. You hear the faint shift of robes, the low intonation of voices in prayer. Then quiet, then a voice, the Pythias, soft, measured, not a chant, not a song, a conversation, perhaps. You do not hear what is said. You only feel its stillness, its weight, like cool spring water in cupped hands. When the voice ends, there is no cheer, no applause, only wind. After the voice, the oracle does not collapse or faint. She walks herself from the adjutant shoulders. Square. You watch as the priests guide her back to her chamber, where she will remain for the rest of the day. A new Pythia will be chosen soon. The rituals will continue. The god will not disappear, but something today feels. Complete later that evening, you return to the pomegranate tree. You sit on the same worn stone as years ago, only now your legs stretch farther. Your shadow is longer. In your hands, you hold a scrap of parchment the old priest gave you earlier. It's a list of names, a record of all Pythias across centuries, their voices, dates, and the questions they answered. The current name has not yet been added. You draw it carefully in ink, and beneath it you write, "She spoke softly, and the god listened." Closing the circle that night, the temple is quiet in a new way, the kind of quiet that follows a farewell. No tears, just the folding of cloth, the cooling of coals, the gentle sound of one era ending and another beginning. You do not dream of laurel, smoke or spring water tonight. You dream of olive groves heavy with fruit, of mountain wind combing your hair, of voices that are felt rather than heard in the dream. The Pythia does not speak. She simply holds out her hand, and in her palm a smooth, carved goat. You wake with the faintest smile, gentle close of story one. There are no monuments in Delphi to this particular Pythia, no statues, no festivals. But in the breath of mountain air, in the soft press of bare feet on sacred stone, her voice lingers, not in the prophecies she gave, but in the quiet that followed them. Let's now wander into a different time, a different place. Story 2. A shepherd's sky, the stars as seen from Arcadia, the hill beneath the hunter asterisk. The sheep are already grazing when you open your eyes. Their bells chime softly in the morning wind, scattered across the green slope like echoes of dreams. You lie on a blanket of goat wool, one arm draped over a canvas sack of bread and dried olives, the other shielding your eyes from the sun rising above the hills of Arcadia. You are not a warrior or a priest or a seer. You are a shepherd, but above your humble world, the gods turn in quiet, glittering procession across the sky in shapes older than memory. At night, you watch them. You trace their patterns with smoke-darkened fingers. You name the stars, not with the words of scholars, but in the murmurs passed from elder to child, by firelight and wool grease. This is your world, grass and stars, fleece and sky, and today. It begins with the story of a hunter one who never leaves the heavens. The day begins in the hills, the sun is low when you begin your rounds. You carry a shepherd's crook carved by your grandfather, its handle smooth from generations of hands. A wineskin, still cool with well water, thumps against your hip. Your sandals are patched but sturdy. You do not need much. Your flock moves slowly, content with the clover and dry grass that covers the slope. You whistle, a pattern known only. to your own sheep, and they bleat in sleepy reply. The morning smells of thyme and dew, and in the distance, you can just make out the faint sound of a reed pipe. Another shepherd, another hill. You think of him like a star across the sky, unseen yet near. These days in Arcadia are simple. The shepherd's world is marked not by clocks or calendars, but by shade, shadow, and the slow tilt of stars. You measure the day by how far Orion has moved across the dome of the sky from last evening, and that is enough to the flock. The fire, the fig by mid-morning. The sheep are resting in a shallow pocket of shade beneath an ancient fig tree. You sit nearby, slicing bread and olives with a dull bronze knife. The bread is coarse, the olives slightly sour, but when paired with a bite of soft goat cheese, they feel like a feast. You watch a lamb try to climb onto a rock, slip, then try again, above you. The sun climbs higher, but your gaze returns to the sky, not the blue expanse of day, but the imagined shapes that still linger there. Last night, you saw Orion, the great hunter, rising just above the eastern ridge. 3 stars in a perfect belt, a sword hanging just below, flanked by 2 brilliant shoulders. Your grandfather called him Kuon-Argyros, the wild dog's master. Your mother simply called him the Watcher. In Arcadia, even shepherds know the stars by name, not because you studied them, but because you live beneath them. 3. A story carved in stars. You remember the tale. You've heard it since you were old enough to hold a stick like a spear in chase. Shadows across the grass. Orion was a hunter, tall and strong, loved by Artemis, goddess of the moon and the wild. He hunted with grace, they say, not cruelty. But like many in the old stories, he was proud. Too proud. Some say he claimed he could hunt every creature on earth. Others say he merely walked beside the goddess too long, and the jealousy of gods is thick and tangled like mountain thorns. In the end, a scorpion was sent, tiny, deadly, hidden beneath a stone. Orion did not see it, and so he fell. But the gods, moved by Artemis's grief, perhaps their own regret, lifted him to the sky. Now he hunts forever, never catching, never falling. Sword and belt forever poised between seasons. You chew your bread slowly. You look up at a sky too bright for stars. Still, you remember where he'll rise again tonight. Ivy, the old man, and the bronze disguise. You nap that afternoon under a linden tree. The sound of footsteps wakes you. A figure approaches along the shepherd's trail, bent, cloaked, his walking stick capped with a bronze ring. You recognize him. An old philosopher who comes to the hills each summer, bringing scrolls and questions. He doesn't speak at first, only sits beside you and unrolls a cloth bundle. Inside, a bronze disc, polished and etched with circles, constellations, and star paths. He places it on the grass. I saw Orion last night, he says softly. You nod. He's climbing earlier. Soon. The man says he will chase the hare. He traces a path on the disc, and then Scorpius will rise. After he is set, you do not speak, but you understand. The scorpion rises only when Orion is gone from the sky. Even in the stars, they do not meet. Even here, among gods. Grudges last. V. The panpipes and the fazazas. Evening approaches. You light a small fire with dry twigs and sheep dung. A smoke column curls into the air, thin and blue. You roast a handful of barley grains in an old pot, watching them pop one by one. The reed pipe from the distant hill plays again, faint, melancholy, almost lost in the rustling of grass. You answer with your own. The song is simple, 4 notes, repeated, a shepherd's lullaby to the setting sun. Overhead, the sky deepens to lavender. Stars begin to wink into being, one by one, like pebbles tossed into a pool of indigo. Thereon the ridge Orion again, rising, steady, patient, the belt, the sword, the shoulders, the knees. You raise your pipe in quiet salute. Good evening, watcher Vi. Sleep beneath the celestial herd. Night falls fully. The sheep settle into stillness, their bells now occasional, distant. You lie back on your woolen blanket, warmed by the fire's last breath. The sky is brilliant, not as the poets describe, but as you know it truly is. Vast, slow, and filled with quiet rules. The stars move in patterns older than language. There's comfort in that. You find Orion again, now climbing toward his zenith. Behind him, the twin stars of Gemini. Below, the dog star, Sirius, burns low and blue. To the far south, the faint curl of La Paz, the hare forever fleeing. You close your eyes. In Arcadia, there is no need for temples or priests to feel the gods. Here, under sheep and stars, they walk with you, in sky stories, in soft pipes, in the light between breaths. And as sleep takes you, the hunter continues his climb, forever chasing, never catching. The constellations as compass, asterisk, dawn finds you wrapped in the scent of fire, ash, and fleece. The night has passed gently. The stars have wheeled silently overhead. The sheep remained close, and no wolves cried from the ravine. The embers of your fire are nearly gone, but the warmth lingers in your bones. You stretch your arms toward the rising sun. The eastern ridgeline glows pale gold, and the world softens into quiet blue. Today, the flock must be moved. You'll lead them to the next grazing slope, a journey that takes the better part of the day. There is no road, no marker but the curve of the land and the sweep of the sky. But you do not worry, because you have your compass, and your compass is made of stars. A shepherd's map is the sky. The goats are already stirring, chewing idly on the last of the clover. You gather your belongings, staff, wineskin, barley bread, and the cloth-wrapped goat cheese Melina gave you yesterday. You tie it carefully, not out of greed, but reverence. In the hills, nothing is wasted. You whistle once sharp, then low-and. Your lead-away lifts her head. The trail ahead curves through olive thickets, passes beneath hawthorn branches, and winds along the stony spine of Arcadia. You've walked it before, but you do not trust your memory. You trust the stars. Even in daylight, they guide you. You know where each constellation sets behind each ridge, where each cluster rises, and what season it brings. The stars do not lie, they drift, they shift, but always with reason. To what the ancients knew your grandfather once showed you. A cracked stone slab tucked in the back of a ruined shrine, long since abandoned. On it, barely visible, was a carving, stars in a circle, each labeled in letters almost rubbed away. He'd whispered, "These are not just stories, boy, they are time, they are place." He'd told you how sailors used the stars to cross seas, and how shepherds like you used them to find water, shade, and safe passage through unknown hills. But more than that, the constellations told you when to plant, when to shear, when to leave, when to stay, and most important, when the wolves would come. You remember those words now as you begin the descent into the next valley, the goat bell tapping rhythmically with your step. 3. The sky turns through the seasons by midday. You reach a flat outcrop where you rest and eat. The sky is too bright for stars, but you sketch them anyway on the ground with your staff. Boats, the herdsman always behind Arcturus, his bright star. Lyra, the harp high in summer, low in winter. Cygnus, the swan flying, the milky way dot, and then the Pleiades, the seven sisters, tiny, glittering, and nearly invisible unless you know where to look. When they vanish from the night sky, your grandfather said, winter is near. When they rise at dusk, it is time to begin the shearing. You wonder how many shepherds before you lay here, in this exact patch of moss, watching the same skies, whispering the same names. You chew your bread slowly, as if each bite contains an echo for a stranger with a star map in the late afternoon. As the sun stretches long shadows across the valley floor, you hear a voice on the wind singing softly in a dialect not quite Arcadian. You crest a ridge and see a man standing beside a low cairn. He is older, cloaked in indigo-dyed wool, with a thin staff carved in spiral patterns. He is drawing something in the dirt. You approach, slowly, politely. He turns and smiles. Lost? He asks. No, you reply, following the stars. He nods approvingly. As you should. You glance down. In the dirt, he has drawn not sheep, not hills, but constellations, interwoven, fluid. He points to one, a strange configuration you've never seen. This one marks a flood in my homeland. He says, it's not from here. He is from the coast, he explains, where sailors chart the sky not in myths, but in movement. His people see boats in the stars, not bears, nets, not serpents. You sit beside him and exchange names of constellations his, and yours, same stars, different stories. The gods are many, it seems, and all of them are written in light. V, the pole star, and the great turn that evening. You climb the highest hill in the region. From here, you can see the entire valley. Below the silver thread of the river, the huddled sheep now bedding down, the glint of olive leaves in twilight, and above, the stars. You look for your anchor first. Polaris, the North Star. It does not move. All the other stars dance around it, whirl like dancers or leaves in wind. But Polaris stays, always, a fixed point, a shepherd's heart. You align your staff. With it, north, safe, true. Around it, the wheel of the heavens turns. Ursa Major, the great bear, dips toward the horizon. Cassiopeia, the queen, rests in her throne of 5 stars. Draco, the dragon, coils in frozen battle between them. It's all there. The entire dome of your world. You feel your chest expand, not with pride, but with peace. You are not lost. You never were. Vi. The sky is enough as sleep creeps in. You lie back on your blanket, your head pillowed on your folded cloak. The fire is down to coals, but the stars are brighter now. You whisper their names as you fall asleep, not as prayers, not as maps, but as friends, your shepherd's compass. Night of the falling star asterisk. The wind changes before the stars begin to fall. You're not sure why you wake, perhaps a shift in the flock, or the rustle of dry laurel leaves by your bedroll, but when you sit up and look eastward, something in the air has shifted. It smells faintly of cold stone, even though summer still lingers in the grass. The fire is out. Your breath rises in the dark like the trail of a moth. Above you, the sky has thickened with stars. There are more than usual tonight, and one of them is moving. Noah. Few you draw in your breath. It's the night of the long falling star, and though no priest has told you, no scroll declared it, your shepherd's heart already knows. This night is different. A shower of sparks in the Arcadian sky, first. It is just one a line of silver against the velvet black, trailing gently like milk poured across glass. Then another, shorter, curved. Then a burst of two, in rapid succession, streaking opposite directions. Your eyes adjust. The stars seem to multiply. Above you, the firmament crackles with movement quiet, slow, as if the gods are brushing dust from their robes and letting it fall. You've heard the stories. Your grandfather called this Heliodromos, the sun's debris, racing through the heavens, marking the forgotten footsteps of Apollo's chariot. Others called it the tears of Artemis, shed for Orion, lost in a different age. But none of those names feel quite right tonight. This is not mythology. This is starlight in motion, and you are small beneath it too. The flock feels the fire. Sheep stir, uneased. Even the old ram bleats softly in the dark, ears twitching. Animals know things before men do. You move among them, gently tapping your staff, whispering calming sounds. No sudden movements. They do not panic yet, but they are listening to the sky, too. You build the fire back to life, slowly, feeding it dried fig wood. The sparks leap toward the heavens as if to join the show, and still the stars fall. You lean back against a rock and draw your blanket around your shoulders. Tonight you will not sleep. Tonight is for watching. 3. The old legends of starfall when you were younger. Your mother told you a different tale, one she learned from her own father, who'd been a shepherd like you. She said falling stars are the messages of the forgotten, words the gods never had time to say. They fall, burning with the weight of silence, trying to be heard. Others say they are spirits escaping the heaven souls, too restless to remain among the stars, yet too weightless to return to earth. You always preferred the first story, that stars were words, that maybe, if you listened close enough, you could hear what they were trying to say. You watch one long trail arc across the entire dome of night, then vanish into the western dark. What word was that? 4. The stranger with the star map again. He returns just before midnight. The cloaked Mantha coastal traveler from 2 nights ago peers without a sound. His spiral-carved staff glinting silver. You're not surprised to see him. The stars seemed to bring him. He sits beside you without greeting, eyes fixed upward. They always fall this time of year, he murmurs, but not always this many. You ask him what they mean. Depends who you ask, he says. The sailors say they mark the death of a god. The temple priests say they mark an omen. I say, he stops. What do you say, you ask? He smiles, eyes tired. I say, the sky likes to remind us that it too is alive. A lesson in skytelling. G spreads his map again, this time not etched in bronze, but in ink and parchment. He shows you how the falling stars all seem to radiate from one place, one dark, quiet point near Perseus and Cassiopeia. The radiant, he calls it. That's the heart. He teaches you how to track their paths backward, how to measure their angles against the fixed constellations, and you realize something new. The stars are not random. Even their falling has form. Together, you draw in the dirt lines, curves, intersections, a language of arcs. It's not myth, it's not fate, it's pattern. You understand now why he walks the hills, why he watches the sky without temple or scroll. The heavens are his teacher, and tonight they teach both of you. Vi, listening without asking, you don't speak much after that. The two of you sit in silence, letting the fire crackle and the heavens do the talking. Every few breaths, another trail appears, some short, some curved. One splits in two. You watch for hours, but unlike others who seek signs, farmers wanting rain, priests wanting proof, you do not ask anything. You only listen, and in that stillness something answers, not in words, not even in meaning, but in a quiet fullness in your chest, like a jug filled to the brim with cold, clear water, peace, not because you understand the stars, but because you don't need to. 7. The morning after, when dawn begins to stretch. Pale fingers across the eastern slope, the stars finally fade. One by one, they vanish like ash in a breeze. The last falling trail vanishes just above the old fig tree. The man is gone. Only a few faint prints left in the dust where he sat. The sheep are sleeping, clustered tightly near the fire's warmth. You rise slowly, brush moss from your cloak, and gather your things. You walk to the ridge, where you can see all of Arcadia laid out before you, valleys, slopes, ancient olive trees, and even though the sky is brightening, you feel you are still. Beneath the stars, you always are. Closing reflection, you were not given a prophecy. No god spoke your name. No omen declared your fate. And yet, you were there beneath a falling sky, listening, and sometimes that is enough. The constellations will continue their wheel. The sheep will graze. The fire will burn. And you will carry this night knot. A lesson, but as a quiet knowing. There are shepherds of flocks, and there are shepherds of stars. Tonight, you were both. Let's now wander into a different time, a different place. Story 3. The olive press of Eleusis, Persephone's other life, when the grain stilled. Good evening, friend. Dim your lamp, pull the blanket a little higher. The world can wait. Tonight, we walk somewhere quieter, not to the heavens, not to the battlefields, but down into soft loam and silent stone, where olive trees remember and myths breathe, slowly beneath the earth. This is not the story, you know, not the thunder of chariots or the cries of gods. This is a gentler tale about grain, about loss, about olive oil, and the quiet rhythms of Persephone's other world. Welcome to Eleusis. A village where time paused. The sun had just risen above the low hills when the grinding stopped in Eleusis. A small village outside the city walls of Athens. The press groaned to a halt one morning, and the people stood still in the silence, not from laziness, not from protest, but because the grain had ceased to grow. For weeks, the earth had offered only stalks without heads. The olives clung to their branches, green and tight. The bees buzzed but did not settle, and beneath it all, the wells fell silent. No one said it aloud, but they all knew the cause. Persephone had not returned. The cycle of 2 queens in the villages of Attica. The people told the story differently than the city poets to them. Persephone was not merely a maiden stolen. She was a woman of 2 realms. Above the ground, she walked through barley fields and brought sweetness to the fig trees. She wandered among the wild thyme, letting lambs nuzzle her open palms. But below she ruled. The underworld was not only darkness and punishment. It was order, storage, rest. There were no shrieks or flames in the Eleusinian telling. Only hush, only roots. And Persephone knew both cycles. 3. The olive press still do sit near the press, watching the men scratch their heads in confusion. The donkey refuses to walk the circle. The basin lies dry. Not a drop of oil in days. Even the millstones seem reluctant to turn, as though resisting a world without fruit. Your mother says the goddess is mourning. Your grandmother says she is waiting. And the old priest near the well says she is deciding. You wonder what he means. You pick an olive from a low branch, still bitter, and hold it in your palm, cold, hard, unready, much like the world around you. For the ritual without words that evening, a soft bell calls the village to the sacred grove, not for a sacrifice, not for a feast, but for silence. A line of women draped in plain linen, laurel tucked behind ears, walk slowly around the grove's edge, scattering barley seeds in a ring. No one speaks. The only sound is the crunch of gravel, the breath of wind, the low coo of a dove on the temple roof. You stand on the edge, watching. This is not a ritual of demand. It is one of patience. They do not beg Persephone to return. They simply prepare so that when she does, the earth will be ready. Below the grain the next morning, something strange happens. A root breaks the surface in your family's small plot, tiny, pale, curling, not from a planted seed. It emerges near the old olive stump, long thought dead. You touch it with one finger. Cool, tender. And then, impossibly, a scent, crushed fig, thyme, and the faintest trace of smoke. You remember the story, that the underworld is not only where people go when they die, it is where seeds go, to sleep, where grain waits for the whisper of return. You mark the root with a stone, vie the hearth and the grain jar that night. Your mother prepares flatbread with the last handful of barley. The loaf is small, almost a token, but she lights the hearth with care. 3 coils of olive bark, a scrap of pressed myrtle, and a whisper to Demeter. No grand offering, just dinner. As you chew slowly, you look to the grain jar in the corner, empty now, but smooth from years of use. You remember how Persephone was called not the queen of the dead, but Kori, the girl of the grain, the one who disappears. Yes, but also the one who always returns. 7. The olive that waited it happens quietly. One morning, as you pass the grove, you hear it before you see it, the soft drip, drip, drip of new oil. The press has begun again, not by force, not by decree, but because the olives have softened, the fruit has opened, and the world has gently, quietly turned. You do not celebrate, not yet, but you pluck one olive from the branch, now black and glossy. You squeeze it between thumb and forefinger, and from its heart, a single drop, dark gold, warm. 8. When the goddess returned, the women of Eleusis do not announce it, but in the fields, barley heads rise again. In the grove, the bees hum louder. In the temple, the laurel wreaths are freshened with care. Persephone has returned not in thunder, not in lightning. But in olive oil, in bread dough rising, in the sudden scent of wet earth. After the morning's first rain, she does not need a procession. Her presence is in the breath between chores, the pause before a harvest, the warmth in a cooling world. The months without her asterisk. The fields do not grieve aloud. They do not wail, or darken, or collapse beneath the weight of their sorrow. Instead, they still. The olive trees grow stiff in their limbs. The barley shoots halt mid-rise. The fig leaves curl and remain tight-fisted. the bees grow slower, landing not for nectar, but simply to rest. This is what it means to be without her. Not catastrophe, not fire, just the pause. And in Eleusis, when Persephone descends into the underworld, when she leaves the world above everything waits. You are a child still, but even you can feel it. The first day after, the first day without Persephone, is not a storm. It is not marked with bells or warnings. It is just quieter. You go to the press yard early, as you always do, to sweep away leaves and refill the clay jugs. But the leaves fall slower today. They drift as if reluctant to touch. The ground and the jugs remain cool inside. The old press groans once as you pass it, the wooden arms heavy with the memory of labor. It does not move. A young woman named Thaleia barefoot, with olive-stained hands, meets your gaze. It has begun, she says. You do not need to ask what she means. 2. The oil in waiting the jars are sealed now. Hundreds of them, stacked, carefully behind linen cloth in the cool room beneath the temple. This oil is not for use, not yet. It is Persephone's oil. The priests say it will last through winter. They speak of provision, of patience, of the wisdom of storage, but the old women know it differently. They speak of it like memory preserved, golden, waiting to be warmed. The oil will be used only when the hunger comes, or when a mother gives birth in the cold, or when a lamp must stay lit through the longest night. They touch the jars gently, not as servants, but as guardians. 3 missed, and the fields left fallow. The weeks pass, slowly. The fields remain untouched now. No seeds are scattered. No tools press into the soil. The villagers walk through them quietly, as though visiting. A sleeping friend. The sun still shines, but it brings no heat. Mist clings low to the roots of olive trees. Flocks stay nearer the hearth. Birds seem to fly lower, slower. You notice the grain jars in each home are no longer opened freely. Bread is cut thinner. Meals stretch with herbs, onions, lentils. And still, no one speaks of scarcity, because this, too, is part of the cycle. The months without her are not a tragedy. They are necessary, like breath held before a sigh. 4. The hearth, as all your family's hearth, glows gently every evening. Your mother burns fennel and dried myrtle, not for warmth, but for the scent. She says it reminds the house of Persephone. At the start of each month, she draws a simple symbol in ash beside the fire, a stalk of barley crossed with a pomegranate, not the full fruit, just its shape. You watch her from across the room, the way she brushes the mark into being with 2 careful fingers. She never speaks while she does it, and once it's drawn, she doesn't look at it again. The pomegranate chamber below the temple. Carved into the slope of the hillside lies a room, where only a few may go. They call it the Chamber of Kore. Each year, before the descent begins, 7 women prepare it. They gather the last fruits, figs, quinces, barley braids, and the sacred pomegranate. All are dried or sealed, symbols of waiting, of paused sweetness. It is not a burial chamber. It is a room of trust. No one eats within its walls. No one lights a flame. But every week, a woman walks down in silence and places a single olive branch on the smooth stone slab. A promise, not a call. She will return when it is time. Thy dreams beneath the earth, your dreams change during the months without. Her not nightmares, neither that, but quieter dreams. You dream of soil, of hands planting seed after seed into the deep. You dream of footsteps on packed earth, of water pouring gently into unseen roots. Once, you dream you are underground, standing not in darkness, but in a hall of light made of polished stone and flickering lamps. There are no doors, only silence. And in the silence, something waits, not asleep, simply present. You wake with the scent of cold clay in your nose. 7. The story of her descent. One afternoon, near midwinter, the priestess Thaleia gathers the village children beneath the bare fig tree. She sits on the stone bench, legs tucked beneath her, and begins the telling, but not with drama. Her voice is slow, warm, like fire just beginning to catch. She chose to eat the seeds, she says. 6 of them. The children lean closer, each seed a promise, not of punishment, but of return. You listen carefully. You've heard other versions, with chariots and cries. But Thaleia's telling is different. In the underworld, she is not trapped. She says, she reigns. And above, Demeter waits not in sorrow, but in stillness. It is not a story of loss. It is a story of rest. 8. The olive that does not bloom. Young tree near the grove refuses to bloom. Its bark is pale, its branches thin. It leans toward the temple as if listening. Thaleia tends it gently every day. She waters its base, rubs oil into its trunk, but she never tries to force its leaves. Some things bloom only when they're ready. She says, you begin to understand. The olives, like Persephone, do not respond to calls, only to time and trust. The villagers stop waiting for the bloom. They simply wait with it. Ix, the quiet festival near, the final month of her absence. The village gathers, no banners, no music, just a walk. Each person carries one thing, a seed, a branch, a kernel of barley, or a fig dried from autumn. They walk to the field. They scatter what they carry, not in rows, not in furrows, but like hope across the waiting earth. No, one speaks, but in the silence something stirs, not above, below. X, the scent before she rise. One morning, the mist smells different, not damp or cold, but warm, like rosemary touched by sun. Like the first breath of rain, you open the window, and across the hill you see it. The olive tree has bloomed, not fully, just 3 leaves at its tip. But it is enough. You run barefoot to tell Thaleia. She only smiles. No need to speak, she says. She's almost here. When she rose again, the scent always returns before she does. Before the trees bloom, before the bees stir, before the Prestons groan again with weight and memory. It begins as a trace of warmth in the cold mist, a sweetness that clings to the rim of your clay cup, the feeling of sun in the bones of the morning, though the sky remains clouded in Eleusis. They do not mark the day of her return with fire or feast. They watch for it in the leaves. They wait for her, not with impatience, but with welcome, and now she is coming. I, the signs in soft things on the first morning of her return. No temple bells ring, but in the grove, bees begin to hum again, not in haste, but in a deep, slow rhythm, like a breath drawn after sleep. The mist rises earlier, dew collects on the curve of young fig leaves, and the air smells of marjoram. Your mother runs her fingers along the stone rim of the olive press and whispers, soon. Even the soil seems to relax. It darkens in patches, softening at the base of the barley fields as if ready to open. The old men on the benches stop talking and simply sit, hands resting lightly on their knees. The waiting is over, but the return is still unfolding. 2. The first bloom, you find it near the well, a crocus barely open, golden-throated, with a stem so pale it looks like it was painted by moonlight. You crouch beside it and touch its petals gently. They quiver but do not close. In the Eleusinian telling, Persephone does not return through fire or gates. She rises through the roots, through the barley, through the pomegranate skin, through the scent of figwood and the hush of old wells. The bloom is her breath. You do not pluck it. You leave it where it grows more. Defiant, enough. 3. The press begins again 3 days after the crocus bloomed. The olive press stirs, not with noise, not with work, but with readiness, the layer. And the women bring out the oiled straps, the clay scoops, the smooth stones. They move like dancers in an old, remembered sequence. No one commands, no one instructs. Everyone knows. The first batch of olives are soft, dark, rich. The air fills with the smell of green fruit cracked beneath stone. A few drops spill into the trough and are caught in the curved lip of the jar. The oil is not for sale. Not yet. This oil is for the hearth, the altar, the skin of elders. Persephone has risen, and now life resumes. For the loaf and the lamp in every household, a small ritual unfolds at dusk. One loaf is baked, simple, flat, marked with a cross of barley. One lamp is lit filled with new oil, wick trimmed by hand. The lamp is placed near the window, the loaf left upon the hearthstone. No one eats, no one touches. They wait, and sometime before dawn, if the ritual is kept with care, the loaf will crack. Just a little. Enough to release a whiff of warm grain and olive, a sign that the household is known, that the goddess has walked past and smiled. V. The chamber opens. The chamber of Kori is opened at mid-morning. The women file in slowly. No ceremony, no announcement, only reverence. Inside, the dried fruits are checked on, have molded. The barley is still crisp in its braid. The pomegranate skin is whole. Nothing has spoiled, because time below is not decay. It is pause. The layer lights one oil lamp and places it at the center of the chamber floor. Its light flickers on the walls like returning breath. They do not speak. Her name aloud. They do not need to. She is here, Vi. Planting again, the fields begin to hum again with motion. Oxen drag plows through the topsoil, turning it open like a page of a long-closed book. The soil is dark and loamy, littered with tiny silver stones that flash in the sun. The women walk slowly behind, scattering seeds not evenly, but with rhythm. You are among them. Each seed is tossed with a quiet word, not a prayer, but a remembering. Return, rest, enough, rise. The words are not to the sky, but to the soil, to the goddess, to the self. 7. Bread for the living at the bakery. The first full loaves are shaped by hand. These are not the thin cakes of winter. They are rich with herbs, olive oil, and barley ground, fresh from the last harvest. You press your thumb into one and feel the warmth rise back at you. The loaves are not eaten alone. They are shared, cut and passed slowly around the table. Dipped in oil, paired with olives, preserved in brine through the cold months. No one speaks much during the meal, but afterward the lamps burn late into the night, because the living have returned to their full shape. 8. The grain that spoke one day. You pass the edge of the field where nothing had grown for years, rocky, sunless, abandoned. But now, in a patch between stones, You see a patch of barley heads pushing upward. No one planted them, no one tends them, but they rise, strong and golden, bowing faintly in the breeze. You place your hand over your chest, a quiet beat. You know what it means. She has not just returned, she has remembered. Ix, the gentle festival at the height of her return, Eleusis holds its most sacred moment not in spring, but at the cusp of it. The festival is not loud. There are no drums, no flutes, only footsteps. Each person carries something like an olive branch, a bowl of grain, a smooth stone, or a piece of wool. They walk slowly toward the temple grove, circling it once, then placing their item at the base of the oldest tree. The offerings are not for thanks, they are acknowledgments that we lived through the stillness, and now we live again. X the return and the reminder you lie beneath the olive tree, eyes closed, the scent of the grove rising around you. You can hear the sheep again on the hills. You can hear the clink of jugs in the press, and from somewhere unseen, you feel it, a hand brushing the soil, a footstep where no path was, a breath through stone. She has returned, not as a goddess clothed in gold, but as the pulse of the world risen. Closing reflection, you will tell others one day that you lived through the months without her, that you felt the stillness, that you listened for her in the silence, and that when she rose again, it was not with fire, it was with bread, oil, mist, roots, bloom. That is how the world turns, not in noise, but in return. Let's now wander into a different time, a different place. Story 4. The stone that dreamed of wings, sculptors of Delphi, and the whispering gods in the dust of the divine asterisk. Good evening, come now. Closer, dim the lamps. Let the chill air curl around your blanket like an old friend. The clamor of the day can wait. Tonight, we return to Delphi, but not to hear the oracle speak. No cryptic riddles, no sacred fumes, not even Apollo's golden lyre. Instead, we step around the temple, into the shaded workshops behind the marble walls, where the gods were made, one quiet tap at a time. This is the story of stone, of the men who spoke not with words, but with chisels, and of a world where marble could hold breath. If you carved it gently enough, I, the apprentice, and the dust the bell rang just after dawn, not from the temple, but from the workshop, where the mist clung low to the pines, and the scent of marble powder hung in the air, like smoke. You were 13. Your fingers were still raw from the week's labor-rinsing pigments, fetching tools, sweeping the curls of discarded stone from the floors. The master had not yet spoken your name, but he had pointed to the block, a cube of white Parian marble, uncut, untouched. Dust it, he said. Not carve, not touch, just dust. And so, with a goat-hair brush and trembling hands, you began. The marble was cold, so cold, it seemed alive. You didn't know it yet, but that was your first conversation with a god. 2. Where the gods waited, the workshop stood behind the sacred path of Delphi, tucked between the olive groves and the sheer cliffs. It was quieter than the temple courts. No cries of pilgrims, no chanting of priests, only the rhythmic sound of chisels and the dust. So much dust. Some said it came from the mountain itself, that every flake held the breath of Apollo. Others said, the dust carried dreams that if you breathed it long enough, you'd see the god you were meant to sculpt. You never saw Apollo, but you dreamed often of wings, not birds, not angels, wings made of marble. 3. The tools of worship the master. Sculptor, old and lean, with fingers like knotted grapevines. Taught by watching, not speaking. He would place tools before you each morning. The point chisel, the claw chisel, the flat chisel, and the rasp, each with a different voice. The point was for finding form. The claw was for shaping muscle. The flat was for softening light. And the rasp was for smoothing the silence between breaths. You learned to listen not just to the sound of stone, but to its resistance. Marble does not yield. It relents, but only if you ask kindly. IV, what marble remembers. There were statues half finished along every wall god's missing arms. Heroes with incomplete torsos, animals frozen in flight. Some had waited years to be completed. Others were never meant to be finished. Your favorite was a woman, perhaps, a nymph whose back curved like water over stone. Her face was hidden, unfinished, only her spine and shoulder carved in delicate, aching detail. The master never spoke of her, but every week he dusted her, and once, when he thought no one saw, he bowed to her. The whisper of form one evening, after the others had left, you stayed behind. The light from the western cliff turned the workshop golden. You traced the curve of a lion's paw left in a slab, forgotten then, without planning. You picked up the point, chisel, just once. You pressed it against a test blocks of limestone. Not marble and tapped. The sound was nothing like music, but it wasn't noise either. You struck again. Then again, and slowly, a groove appeared. Not deep, not graceful, but yours. And that night, you dreamed of a statue with no face, holding a broken lyre, wings folded tightly around its body like a shell. Vi, the sculptors feast each new moon. The sculptors gathered not in the temple, but near the cliffside spring. They brought bread soaked in oil, salted fish, figs, and stories. They did not speak of gods as priests did. They spoke of proportions, of grain, of the mystery of symmetry. One journeyman once said, "A god is not made when the marble stands. A god is made when we step back and feel something." Looking back, the others nodded. You understood, almost. The master sat at the edge, carving a block of soft wood. A bird, you thought, or maybe wings. But he did not offer answers, only more silence. 7. The statue that bled there was once a statue, a youth with outstretched hands, offering a branch to the temple. One day, a visitor leaned too close, mocking its pose. The next morning, the youth's fingers were cracked by dusk. The crack had bled red pigment, not real blood, ochre from within the marble. No one had painted it, no one claimed it. The master only said, "Do not ask what gods feel, only carve what they leave behind." From that day, you bowed before entering the workshop, even if it was empty. 8. Apollo's heel after 3 winters. The master let you assist with a commission, a statue of Apollo life-size golden-eyed, meant to stand in the outer court of the temple. You were not to touch the face, only the heel. For 6 weeks, you shaped the curve of tendon and skin, smoothing the point where his foot met the plinth. You knew it would never be seen. It would rest on stone. But the master said, even gods need a place to stand. So you carved it with care. You gave the god balance. And when the statue was raised, pilgrims praised the eyes. But you knew he would not have stood without the heel. 9. What cannot be carved. There were things you never learned to shape. The curve of laughter in a goddess's cheek. The moment just before movement. The lift of a wrist. The breath caught in a marble throat. The master said, "These are not for us. But how do you know when to stop?" You asked once. he replied, when the stone starts speaking back. You never fully understood that until one morning, working alone, you cut a single line too deep. The chisel slipped, and the face of a near-finished figure cracked, not shattered, but changed. The eyes, once serene, now looked startled, human. You stepped back, and for the first time, did not touch it again. The statue with wings near the end of your apprenticeship. The master brought out a block that had been covered for years, marble veined faintly with gold. He placed your hand on it. You've been dreaming of wings, he said, and for the next 2 years, you carved, you shaped the folds of feathers not stiff, not dramatic, but resting, not spread for flight, but curled in repose. A figure seated, faceless, holding nothing, and when it was done, the master nodded. Let her remain unknown. She was placed not in the temple, but in the grove where pilgrims rarely walked. And yet, years later, people still left flowers at her feet. Marble as memory * stone does not forget. That is what the old sculptors of Delphi believed. Not in the way people remember with names or years, but in weight, in balance, in grain. A statue once made holds the memory of every hand that touched it, every pause, every breath between the chisel's fall and the sculptor's doubt. And here, in the shaded grove behind the temple, where pilgrims rarely wander and olive branches whisper low, memory lingers not in words, but in form. The grove of the forgotten works you return now, older, the chisel no longer foreign in your hand. You walk through the grove where the lesser statues are placed, not the ones polished for temple halls, but those whose names were lost, whose features were softened by time or wind. A sphinx with no eyes, a boy holding an empty scroll, winged figure seated, her face unfinished. No crowds, no priests, only silence. You run your palm over the curve of her feathered shoulder. The marble is warm in the sun. You remember carving this one, not for worship, not for glory, but because the stone had asked to. The tools you keep in the leather roll at your waist. You keep only 3 tools now. The point chisel sharpened thin, the rasp smoothed by decades, and a small bronze pick, curved like a crescent moon, used not for shaping but for listening. You tap gently on the stone before each new cut, not to test its sound, but to feel the tone, its willingness, its readiness. You once believed its superstition, now you believe it. Memory, marble that has been touched before, sings slightly differently, as if remembering another hand. 3. The apprentices, mistake years ago. One apprentice struck a statue too hard. The arm cracked clean off. He wept, believing he'd ruined the work. But the master did not scold him. Instead, he said, now, it has a history. He carved the statue a new same figure, same shape, but gave her a different gesture. Instead of outstretched arms, she held the broken limb close, as if in contemplation. People wept when they saw her, not for what she had lost, but for what she now held. 4. The memory in proportion you begin your newest commission Apollo, again. Not the god as victor, but as youth. Not triumphant, but thoughtful. You stare at the marble block for 3 days before touching it. Then, only a marking, a faint red chalk line down the center. You recall the canon of Polykletos, the ideal body in ratio, the sacred geometry of 7 heads height, the curve of the leg in contrapposto. But you do not begin there. You start with the shoulders, because that is where most men carry memory, joy, failure, pride, shame. The body will follow. But memory begins with weight. The laughing god, there, was once a statue no one believed sacred. It showed a satyr not leering or wild, but mid-laugh, eyes closed, hand over heart. The priests dismissed it, too human, too soft. They ordered it removed. But the pilgrims disagreed. They came quietly, not for prophecy, but to sit near the statue's feet, to whisper their small joys, to place coins in the crook of his elbow, to lean against the plinth and smile. The priests relented, and now, in a temple corner, half hidden by ivy, the laughing god remains stone. Yes, but remembered in laughter. The sculptor's hands, your hands ache more now, not from age, from remembering. Each statue you touch brings with it 1,000 choices made, long ago curves accepted, faults smoothed, muscles imagined once. You tried to carve a young warrior's jaw and found yourself shaping your brother's. You hadn't seen him in years. Another time, you softened the gaze of Athena and realized it was your mother's quiet disappointment. Sculpture is not copying the gods. It is recalling the faces of those who made you believe in them. 7. The temple bell. And the cloaked figure, one winter dusk, the temple bell rings, not for sacrifice, but for art. A cloaked figure has arrived. She requests no oracle, only a statue, a goddess, she says, but not one with a name. She offers no coin, only a stone-smooth black, shaped like a wing. She places it in your palm. You accept. The commission is not formal, but you begin. Anyway, you do not draw, you do not plan. You place the black stone near your bench and begin with the ribs 8. The days that disappear, you work for weeks without a word. The statue grows, slowly, not upward, but inward. Each cut is a memory you don't remember choosing. Her hair twists like vines. Her feet do not touch the ground. Her left hand is open, not reaching, not offering, just open. And all the while, the black stone rests nearby, untouched, but somehow, watching the days slip past like fog. Pilgrims come and go. The temple chants, rise and fall. But you carve. You no longer dream. You no longer eat beside others. You shape, because something is asking to be remembered. 9. The morning of flight, you finish her on the spring equinox, not with a flourish, not with an offering. You simply step back and breathe. She stands now in the grove, not facing the temple, but the mountain. Her wings are not spread, but folded. Her eyes are not open, but half closed. She is not flying, she is remembering how. The cloaked woman never returns, but a child leaves a flower at the base of the plinth. And soon others follow, not to pray, but to sit and to listen. Because some statues do not speak loudly, they whisper. Where statues sleep, statues do not sleep like we do. They rest in different rhythms, not of night and day, but of wind and quiet, of pilgrims passing, of shadows drifting across plinths. Their dreams are not made of color or sound. They dream in texture of skin remembered in marble, of voices caught between shoulder and collarbone. And here, in Delphi's grove, where the gods were carved, left, and whether the statues do not fade, they wait, some with open arms, some with no faces, all with something unfinished. And tonight, you walk among them, older now, slower, but still listening, still shaping memory. The grove at dusk. You return to the grove at twilight, carrying no tools, just a worn satchel filled with cloth, olive oil, and a single piece of soft leather. It's quiet here. Even the bees seem to drift more slowly. The stone figures catch the light gently, there, edges softened by time and moss. You kneel beside the seated figure you once carved, the winged one. The one without a name. With practiced care, you wipe the dust from her wrist. Her marble is cool, smooth where the moss has not crept. Someone has left a fig beside her. Another has tied a thread of dyed wool around her toe. She is no longer yours. She belongs to the quiet now, too. The memory that outlasts the maker you. Remember how you shaped her. Wings first, then feet. You remember the nights spent reworking her hands, unsure whether they should be open or closed. But now, standing before her, you realize you've forgotten what you meant her to be. Yet she remains, not for meaning, not for clarity, but for presence. You brush your fingers along her shoulder. The faint texture of the chisel remains those final strokes. You once thought to rough, now they feel like breath, like exhale. 3. The sculptor's final block in the courtyard behind your home. There is one block left, Parian marble cut, smooth, wrapped in cloth. Untouched, you received it 5 winters ago. You've never carved it. Some days you stare at it for hours, others you pass by without a glance. You don't know what lives in it yet, or if anything does, but you keep it because even an uncarved stone holds potential. And sometimes that's enough. 4. The pilgrim who asked nothing. One spring morning, a young woman came to your door. She wore no emblem, no traveler's cloak, no temple mark, just dust on her sandals. I don't want a statue, she said. I just want to know how to look at one. You brought her to the grove. You showed her the laughing satyr, the pensive warrior, the winged figure. She said nothing for a long while. Then they feel gentle, not powerful, not divine, gentle. You smiled, because that too was a kind of worship. The cracked lion. One statue has split, a lion, carved decades ago, seated with one paw forward, mouth closed, not roaring, but watching. Now, a deep crack runs down its side. The grain of the marble has shifted. Rain has crept inside. The temple offered to remove it, but you refused. You packed the crack with wool and resin, not to hide it, but to remind the stone it is still cared for. You sit beside it now, offering silence, and the lion watches still. The statues that never win your workshop are sketches of works never made. A dancer caught mid-spin, a man kneeling beside a broken mirror, a horse, wings unfurled, too large for any plinth. You do not regret them. Each sketch was a conversation. Each plan was a gesture. You remember the impulse more than the detail, and in quiet moments, you imagine them statues that never woke, still dreaming somewhere. Inside stone. 7. The carver's hands. Your fingers are crooked now, stiff in the morning, gentle only in the evenings. You rub olive oil into your knuckles, not as treatment, but as ritual. You do not carve much anymore, but your hands still remember weight. You still reach for plinths without thinking, still measure proportion in shadows. And when you pass stone, your palm always twitches, listening, just in case. 8. The night procession. It happens once each year, not during festivals, not during high rites, but quietly, at moon's peak. The sculptors young and old walk to the grove, carrying oil, lamps and soft brushes. They clean the statues in silence. Not all of them, only the ones forgotten by name. A youth with a cracked flute, a woman seated, one sandal missing, a god with no eyes. You watch the young carvers move gently, speaking not to each other, but to the marble. Some sing under their breath, some hum, some cry. The statues say nothing, but they remember. Ix, the oracle's statue there, is a legend, never written, passed only among sculptors, that beneath the temple, in a sealed chamber, there stands a statue of the Pythio, the oracle herself, not in ecstasy, not crowned, but asleep, lips parted, hands folded, eyes closed, carved not by commission, but by devotion. No one knows who made her know. One claims her, but some say she breathes in spring, and if you sit long enough beside her, you'll hear your own thoughts settle. Not answers, just stillness. X. The grove at Donnet is morning. The olive leaves are silver with dew. The statues catch the first light soft halos on brow, cheek, shoulder. You walk once more through the grove. Your pace is slow, but your gaze is clear. You do not speak to the marble anymore. It does not need you to. It holds your voice, your pauses, your errors and grace. You sit beneath the winged figure, and in the hush, you wonder, do statues ever wonder who made them? Do they remember names, or just hands? Final reflection. Stone is not lifeless. It simply moves slower than we do, and in that slowness, it listens longer, remembers more gently, forgets more kindly. You do not need to be carved to be remembered. Sometimes it is enough to have touched what endures. Let's now drift into a new corner of forgotten history. Story 5. The loom beneath the laurel weavers of Delphi, and the threads of fate the spindles first circle asterisk. Good evening, gentle traveler. Let the weight of your day unravel now. Let your limbs grow soft, your breath slow. Dim the light. Pull the blanket over your shoulder. You are safe here, and now we return not to the oracle's flame, nor the sculptor's chisel, but to a quieter labor, to the thread pulled across the lap of an old woman, to the spindle turning slowly beneath olive trees, to the loom creaking gently in a darkened courtyard. This is not the myth of thunder or war. This is the myth of weaving, dot of rhythm, of breath, of fate spun one loop at a time. I, the courtyard where cloth begins, in the western quarter of Delphi, where no offerings are burned and no pilgrims crowd, there is a courtyard of worn stone and shade. There 7 women gather. Each morning before the sun touches the temple gates, they bring baskets of wool and flax, brushes of figwood, jars of lye-soaked water, skeins of sun-bleached yarn. They speak little, only what is needed. A nod for the warp, a glance for the dye, a hand placed lightly on the beam of a loom. To test the silence, you are 12 when you join them. Too young, perhaps, but your grandmother weaves here, and she has brought you to learn. 2. The thread from the back room, the wool, is stored in a small room off the courtyard. Cool, smelling of old oil and the sweet sting of lanolin. You are sent there to fetch the first bundle. You touch it, gently raw, coarse, clumped with earth and straw, but beneath the mess it is soft, lush, alive in its own slow way. Your grandmother shows you how to card it, combing the strands with flat wooden paddles, teeth like blunt knives. You work in silence. You must remove everything that doesn't want to stay, she says. Only what yields can be spun. You do not understand yet, but you nod. 3. The first spindle, the spindle is simple, a dowel of smooth wood, a whirl of stone or clay, a hook shaped like a bird's beak. You twist the cleaned wool round the shaft and set it spin. At first, it jerks, stutters, drops, the thread breaks. Again, again. But then one morning it holds. You pull the fibers slowly, feeling their tension. The spindle spins. The thread grows longer. Your fingers learn the rhythm. Draw, twist, let fall. And for the first time, you hear it. The sound no one speaks of. The faint hum of the thread as it tightens, like breath pulled across silence. 4. The dye pots in. The corner of the courtyard sit 3 dye pots, stained deep from years of use. The blue pot smells sharp, metallic indigo fermented in clay. The red comes from madder root, ground fine and steeped in lye. The yellow your favorite is made, from saffron, rare and sweet. Like sunlight trapped in water, your grandmother lets you lower your first skein. You watch as the wool darkens, shifts, breathes. Color is not for beauty, she says. It is for memory. You ask what she means. She dips her own hand into the pot and lifts it out stained gold. It reminds the cloth of the sun. V. The loom in the corner. The loom is taller than you, wooden, heavy, older than most of the women who use it. Your grandmother shows you how to set the warp vertical threads, stretched taut like a harp, each one placed with care, spaced evenly, tied in silence. Then comes the weft thread passed back and forth with a shuttle. Beating the cloth gently with a comb, she does not rush. Every thread is a moment, she says. You do not hurry time. So you learn to follow the beat. Back, press, beat. Back, press, beat. And slowly, a cloth begins to grow. Vi, the whisper of the Myrath weavers, do not speak of the gods often. But at dusk, as the light fades and the last threads are tied off, they sometimes whisper of the Moirai the Fates, Clotho, who spins, Lachesis, who measures, Atropos, who cuts, 3 sisters, old as Erdot. The women say that when the thread tangles on its own, Clotho is laughing. When the dye changes color without reason, Lachesis is choosing dot. When a spindle breaks, Atropos has come near. You ask if it's true. Your grandmother only shrugs. Perhaps the gods do not speak in words, she says. Perhaps they speak in wool. V. The wash and the wind after each length of cloth is woven. It is washed in the spring wear. The water runs cold, clear, bitter with stone. You carry the cloth there one morning, arms full, chest tight with pride. The spring gurgles softly. You kneel, soak, press, rinse again, and then you wait. Let the wind dry it. The cloth flutters on the rocks. Pale, blue, gold, soft crimson. You lie back in the grass, and for the first time, the cloth you made casts a shadow. You close your eyes and dream of thread pulled across the stars. Ate the cloth for the temple one day. The temple sends a request. A new veil is needed for the laurel statue of Apollo, woven of undyed wool, with one red stripe at each end. The weavers nod. They do not cheer. They do not pray. They simply prepare. You are allowed to help set the warp your hands. Tremble. This is not cloth for trade, not for warmth. This is cloth for the god. You work slowly. You hum as you pass the shuttle through, and you think, if the gods do listen, they will hear this rhythm first. Ix, the festival of threads each year before the harvest. The weavers host a quiet celebration, not in the temple, not in the square, but here in the courtyard, under the fig tree. They hang lengths of old cloth on the walls, share wine and bread, dip thread into pots of color, tie knots for the lost. Some bring thread from relatives who have died, others from babies not yet born. One woman hangs a thread for a lover, never returned from war. They do not speak of grief, but they weave it into the edges. They make it soft, they make it warm. The thread without end one night. You dream of a single thread. It stretches across the sky, glowing, spinning, turning endlessly. You reach for it, but your hand passes through. You wake to find your grandmother weaving in. The dark don't know lamp, no fire, just her and the loom. You watch her, she doesn't speak, but the cloth grows longer, softer, and in its folds. You see it, the spiral, the loop, the circle that the fates whisper into every thread. And you understand, we do not weave only for use. We weave so the world may remember how to hold itself together. The threads that remember, you do not write with ink. You write with thread, at least. That's what your grandmother used to say softly, at the edge of sleep, as if the words themselves were being woven from memory in the still hours before. Dawn, the courtyard is nearly invisible, veiled in silver mist. The looms are quiet, the dye pots cold, but the air itself seems to hold the pulse of ancient threads, echoes of hands long gone, still tugging weft through warp dot. This is where the past breathes, not in marble, not in stone, but in cloth. The memory loom. It is said that the first loom in Delphi was not carved but grown from an olive tree bent by wind and time, from beams rescued from a collapsed stable, from cords woven with threads from 7 mothers. No one knows who wove on it first, but the oldest weaver in your courtyard. Clymene sits before it now, her eyes clouded, her hands knotted like gnarled roots, and yet she never misses a thread. She weaves not by sight, but by memory. Each pass of the shuttle is a name, each knot a prayer, each pause a moment of grief stitched in silence. You've watched her for years, but today she calls you closer. Today she says, you must learn to weave for the dead. 2. Cloth for the silent. Not all cloth is made to be worn. Some is made to be buried in Delphi. When someone passes quietly, without fanfare, without family, it is the weavers who clothe them, not with grandeur, not with embroidered gods, but with linen plain and soft, dyed once in dust-colored purple, marked with a single red line across the hem. The red is never explained. You ask your grandmother once. She replies, so the river knows where to carry them. You do not ask again. 3. Threads of the forgotten inn. The back room of the courtyard is a small chest, bound with rusted hinges and faded bronze clasps. Inside are spools of thread never used. Each one bears a name scratched faintly on a tag. Agath, Callisthenes, Sappho, Timon, mother's brother. These are memory threads, too precious to weave, too sacred to discard. The oldest among you wind them carefully once a year. Dust the box. Say nothing, but sometimes, when a new child is born, a strand is added to their swaddling cloth, a soft whisper from the past, sewn into the beginning of a new life. For the festival veil each spring, during the festival of the laurel, the weavers create a single great veil hung between 2 laurel trees at the courtyard entrance. It is not grand, no gold, no pattern, but it is long. So long that 3 women carry it at once, stretched tight so it does not touch the ground. The veil is made entirely of reclaimed thread cut from worn tunics, unspooled from unraveled blankets, clipped from discarded braids. It is a cloth of fragments, but when it catches the wind, it ripples like one piece. Pilgrims pass beneath it. They touch its edge. Some weep, some smile. It is not the gods who are honored that day. It is memory. V. The dyer's secret. There is one dye pot that no one stirs, kept near the back, covered with linen, sealed with wax. The color is said to be called shadow vine. It does not stain all cloth, only thread that has been worn, only wool that has once been part of a life. When the dye takes, it darkens to a color between gray and violet so deep it absorbs light. Only Clymene knows how to brew it. You once asked her what gives it the color. She said, loss. You asked again, softly. She replied, and figs, but mostly loss. Vi, the boy's cloak mother comes one morning with her son's old cloak. He died last winter illness. Sudden the cloak still smells of time and soot. Still bears a patch where it had been mended twice. She asks the weavers not to repair it, not to remake it, but to turn it into something else. So, strand by strand, they unweave it. You join them. It takes 4 days, and when it's done, the thread is coiled into a new skein. Dyed in Left to dry, the mother returns. She does not take the thread. She only presses her forehead to it and whispers something you cannot hear. VII. The weaver's silence there is a rule in the courtyard. If someone weaves in silence, you do not speak. No. Matter how long, it might be a single hour. It might be 3 days. This silence is not avoidance, it is preservation. Some things cannot be said in words, but they can be shaped in pattern. A red thread at a diagonal, 3 blue weft strands between, every 5 of white, a skipped warp every 7 rows. The cloth tells what the mouth cannot. When it's finished, it is folded, bound in laurel leaves, and placed beneath the fig tree. No one asks what it meant, but everyone remembers how it was made. 8th. The burial. Tapestricline dies in the winter. No warning, no sound, just a breath that stops, softly, while she still holds the shuttle in her palm. The weavers gather, they wash her hands, they light a single lamp, and then, without speaking, they begin the burial tapestry. It is made from dozens of old scraps, a strip from the first temple veil, a corner of cloth from a fallen fig tree, fringes from festival cloaks, long since faded. You bring your first spindle thread, thin, uneven, soft as whisper. The others accept it. Together, you weave for 2 days, and when it is done, the cloth glows. Gently in the morning, frosted is placed over her, not to hide her, but to carry her. A CROSSIX, the unweaving the, is one ritual older than weaving. The UNWEAV, NG. It is done only once each generation, by the oldest living weaver and the youngest. Apprenticed together, they choose one old cloth, thick with memory. Something that once held meaning but is no longer understood. They sit across from each other, knees nearly touching, and begin pulling it apart, thread by thread. No scissors, no haste. It takes hours, sometimes days, but when it's done, the thread is brushed clean, coiled, and sealed in a clay jar, buried beneath the courtyard stone. A memory returned to silence. X the cloth that breathes, your grandmother once told you. A good cloth breathes. You thought she meant softness years later. As you sit alone at your loom climbing gone, your own fingers now slow, you finally understand. A cloth breathes when it remembers the space between threads, when it honors absence as much as presence. You finish a new piece, plain, wide, cream-colored, with a single blue thread curved in one slow arc across its width. You do not name it. You fold it carefully, place it beside the fig tree, and sit beneath your fingertips. The thread holds warmth and something else, not story, not loss, just time, soft, unrushed, remembered. The weavers who let go, *, good evening again, dear traveller. Let your thoughts slow like the spindle's circle. Let the room fall into hush. You are safe here wrapped in the weightless comfort of silence and shadow, beneath trees that never rush. We return now to Delphi, not to temples or visions, but to the simple movements of hands that have woven through time. Tonight's story is not about making cloth, it is about release, about what happens when the thread runs out, or when we must choose to let it fall. Some cloth is meant to last, some to unravel, and some only to pass through our fingers once. And so we begin the final chapter, the weavers who learned to let go. The last pattern. You do not notice it at first. The change is small, a missed beat on the loom, a slightly crooked edge, a knot tied too tightly, but over weeks the signs grow, a tremor in the hand of the oldest weaver, the sound of a spindle dropped, the slow turning away from the dye pots. Your grandmother, once steady as a stone beam, now stands at her loom with her eyes closed, not to see, but to remember. Then, one day, she folds her apron, sets it on her bench, and says softly, "It is time." No ceremony, no farewell, just time, and the soft sound of her shuttle resting on wood. Aye, the apprenticeship. Ends the day your apprenticeship began. You held a spindle so tightly your knuckles turned white. Now, years later, you hold it gently, balance, alive, when. Your teacher who once wove through childbirth, flood, and famine hangs her loom keys on the nail by the door. She does not look back. She sits in the courtyard instead, facing the fig tree, and says, "You teach the next one." And just like that, the loom is yours. You do not feel ready, but readiness is not part of the loom. Only rhythm, only hands, only letting the thread come through. 3. The cloth of farewell in Delphi. There is a custom for weavers who step away. A farewell cloth. Not woven by the one who leaves, but by those who remain. Each woman weaves one section, no longer than her own arm. The threads are chosen not for beauty, but for memory. A strand from a wedding shawl, a thread from a child's tunic, a bit of lint from a veil. When it is done, the cloth is not displayed. It is folded 3 times, bound in olive string, and left on the bench of the weaver who departs. They may take it, or leave it, but it is never unwrapped. Memory does not always need to be seen, only offered for. The dream of the empty loom you dream, often now, not of patterns, but of the loom itself. Empty sunlight, filtering through its frame, the beam catching dust, a single strand of wool caught at the edge. You wake with your fingers moving as though weaving, but there is no cloth, and yet you feel peace. The loom is not forgotten, it is resting, like soil after harvest. The spindle tree in the far corner of the courtyard, near the wall where ivy climbs, stands a spindle tree, truly a tree, but a carving tool, narrow, with wooden arms like a wheel. Every weaver, when she finishes her last cloth, adds her spindle to its branches. Some are worn, smooth, some still hold thread. Yours is the 29th to be added. You place it quietly, whispering only, "Thank you." No one applauds, but a breeze moves the tree, and the sound of the spindles brushing together is like wind over reeds vie. Teaching the youngest, her name is Alara. She is 8 years old. She cannot yet spin, but she can wind thread on a bobbin. She can rinse yarn in spring water. She hums when she works. You teach her to card wool. She drops the paddles twice. You show her again, not too fast. You say, wool listens best when spoken to slowly. She looks up at you, nods seriously, and combs again. And in that moment, you understand. You have not left the loom. You have passed through it, and now it sings in other hands. 7. The unfinished thread. Morning, as you sweep the courtyard, you find a spool, wrapped loosely, pale green thread. It is not marked. You ask around. No one claims it. You leave it on the windowsill. It stays there for 3 days. Then, Elara picks it up. She does not ask. She simply begins to spin it into something new. You watch from your bench and smile. Some threads are not meant to be finished, only carried forward by VIII. The softening your hands no longer ache, not because they are young, but because they are still. You rub oil into your fingers. You sit in the sun. You listen to the rhythm of others at the loom. And it is enough not to do, but to witness, to hold space, to become part of the silence between warp and weft.ix. The loom beneath the laurel there is a saying in Delphi. Even the gods must yield to time. You think of this as you sit beneath the laurel tree. The old loom, your loom now, rests nearby. The frame has been polished, the pegs replaced, the bench rewoven with reed. Elara uses it now. Her shoulders are straighter, her rhythm sure. You do not correct her anymore. You simply sit, and in your stillness, you realize the loom does not belong to any one weaver. It belongs to the moment that thread becomes breath, and breath becomes clothx, the last. Thread, you sit by yourself one evening, cloth on your lap, sunset in the fig leaves. You run your fingers over the weave. One strand is loose. You tug it gently. It pulls free. You tug again, and the thread slides across the surface. Unbinding, you do not stop. You let it come undone, row by row, breath by breath, until the cloth is no longer cloth, just a handful of soft, curled thread. You tie it once, loosely, and tuck it into your sleeve. Not to keep, only to carry, for a little longer. Then you rise and walk into the courtyard, where the next cloth is already being born. Let's now wander into a different time, a different place,